WIA is continuing coverage with just heartbreaking developments today in the case of Javeayah Harris out of Aiken County. Sheriff Marty Sawyer, the Aiken County Sheriff, announcing this morning that part of that 4-year-old's remains were discovered in Cedar Creek Reservoir in Fairfield County.
Yeah, so we want to bring you up to speed on this devastating case. The little girl was initially reported missing by her mother on June 30th, followed by search efforts. Well, over the weekend, the Aiken Sheriff giving us a significant update that Javeayah had been dead at least a month before that call was even made. And now today, the news of her remains and additional charges forthcoming.
WIS's Kayla Page brings us up to date, and we need to warn you that a number of the details that the sheriff shared earlier today are just unspeakable and really difficult to hear.
There's a voice memo that exists on this earth of a 4-year-old girl saying 2 words to a camera: "Boo Bear." Someone off screen laughs. A grown man's voice asks her something about a baby, and she answers again in that same small, proud voice.
It's a heart-wrenching development for everyone in this case. You can hear audible gasps from community members who came to stop by to listen to the sheriff speak. Sheriff Sawyer sending a clear message that he would not refer to Javeayah's parents as her parents or mom and dad. He made a clear point to mention that this case has been difficult, deeply disturbing, and emotionally taxing, weighing heavily on everyone at the sheriff's office. During Thursday's press conference, Aiken County Sheriff Marty Sawyer stated that a few human remains were found at the Cedar Creek Reservoir in Fairfield County this week. DNA evidence revealing it was the biological offspring of Javeayah Harris and Michaela Herring, and that extensive analysis indicates that efforts were made to destroy and conceal evidence. The sheriff also shared that there was use of corrosive chemicals and other tools to accelerate the destruction of Javeayah's body, and evidence indicates the parents poured what remains were left in.
Strangers who had never met this child left their jobs, their families, their air conditioning, to walk tree lines calling out a name they'd only just learned. They were looking for a little girl who, according to the arrest warrants now sitting in the Aiken County court system, had already been dead for weeks. Not days, weeks. And the 2 people who launched that search, who cried on camera, who described her clothing down to the beads in her hair, who stood in their own front yard while drones flew overhead looking for a child they already knew would never be found alive, are the same 2 people who now stand charged with causing her death. This is the update to a story we have already told you once. If you're new to this case, stay with us, because we're going to walk you through everything from the beginning. And if you've been following along since the first search dogs went into those woods, what you're about to hear is worse than what we told you the first time. We know that because we've read the warrants ourselves. This is the case of Javeayah Harris.
In my 37-year career in law enforcement, I have never, ever heard of anything so horrific. As a result of this information, it's unlikely that the entirety of Javeayah's body or any other remains from this point forward will be recovered. And I'll say this again, we had all hoped and prayed to find her body, but with the information we've uncovered, that's simply not possible.
The sheriff went on to say that it is unlikely that the entirety of Javeayah's body will be recovered and that additional charges of destruction of human remains are being filed. Reporting in Aiken, Kayla Page, WIS News 10.
Before the warrants, before the confessions, before a single deputy ever knocked on a door on Hillsborough Street, there was a 4-year-old girl who liked chickens. Javeayah Harris lived in a modest house in a quiet stretch of Aiken County, South Carolina, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave from their porches and everyone at least half recognizes everyone else's car. She was small for her age, around 40 pounds, with pink beads braided into her hair that she was, by every account from people who knew her, proud of. She had a favorite pair of pajamas, pink with Minnie Mouse on them. She liked to sit near the chicken coop in the backyard and watch the birds move around. And according to her mother's own words, that coop was the first place anyone thought to look for her whenever she wandered. People who spent time around her describe a child who was unusually polite for her age. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. The kind of manners that get commented on by adults who aren't used to hearing them from a 4-year-old anymore. She was being evaluated for autism, though no formal diagnosis had been completed, and by every account she was verbal, sharp, and fully capable of carrying a conversation with an adult. She liked to hold hands when she walked somewhere, even somewhere as small as the walk to the refrigerator. She liked to play pirates at the park. She liked a puppy that showed up around the property. That's who she was on the good days. But there's another version of Javeayah that exists in this case, one that came from people who lived closest to her, the neighbors who noticed something wasn't right long before any of this reached a headline. One woman who spent time with the family described going to check on Javeayah and finding her lie on a mattress that had clearly been slept and urinated on repeatedly, in a room where an iPad had been propped in front of her face, and where the child simply did not move, not curious, not reaching for attention, just still. She described bringing Javeayah into her own home to bathe her, to feed her, to put clean clothes on her, and then sending her back. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this story, because it tells you something the Warrants would later confirm in cold legal language. This was not invisible. People saw enough to feel that something was wrong. They just didn't have the full picture, and by the time anyone did, it was already too late to matter. There was an uncle, too, a man known in the family and to online followers of this case, simply as Junebug. Text message screenshots that later circulated online, in which the family and reporting outlets have referenced throughout this case, appear to show him reaching out to Javeayah's mother, Michelle Herring, during the exact window investigators now say the abuse was happening, asking about her, asking to see her. According to those screenshots, every time he asked directly, he says he was redirected, an old video sent back to him, a change of subject, a door quietly closed in digital form, the same way it may have been closed in the physical world. Somewhere in that gap between the people who noticed and the people who acted, a little girl who liked chickens and pirates and Minnie Mouse pajamas was living a version of her final weeks that almost no one on the outside could have imagined. We're going to walk through exactly how that gap became fatal. But first, you need to hear the call that started all of this, because once you know what we know now, it does not sound the same way twice. On the night of June 30th, Aiken County 911 received a call from a woman who identified herself as Javeayah's mother. She told the dispatcher she'd stepped inside to cook dinner. She said she'd told her daughter it was almost time to come in for the night. She said when she went back outside to get her, Javeayah was gone. Listen to how specific this call is, because that specificity is exactly why it worked.
Emergency.
Man, my man. I can't find my baby. Yes, ma'am. She was outside playing, and I came out here after cooking dinner a little bit, and I'm looking for her, but I don't see her nowhere.
All right. How old is this baby?
She's 4.
All right. What was she wearing?
She has on pink Minnie Mouse pajamas, and she had me in pink beads. She had braids.
Is she black, white, or Hispanic?
She's mixed.
Okay. How long ago did you see her, ma'am? When was the last time you saw her?
I just came out here like no less than 20 or 30 minutes ago. I went in the house to cook dinner, and I
Yes,
told
ma'am.
her it's time to come in once it starts getting dark. And when I came out here, I
Okay.
can't find her.
Just take a breath for me, okay? I already have them on the way to you, okay? Do you know where she might be heading? Okay. You have any family or friends that live around the area?
No, but she usually try to chase our chickens to catch them, and I've been looking through the woods to try to see if I see her, but I don't see her nowhere.
What's your name?
My name is Michelle Harris.
What's her name?
Javeayah Harris.
Harris. I couldn't hear the first name.
Javeayah is spelled Javeayah. And I wasn't out here. I'm 39 weeks pregnant. I can't keep up with her like that.
Okay. And what? Anybody else out there with her? Like that was out there with her? Any friends, kids playing with her?
The way our yard is set up, it's nothing but the dogs and the chickens
Okay.
right here at the back.
All right. Does she have any health issues? Any mental issues? Anything like that?
They suspected she was autistic, but she just now turned 4, so they don't have no diagnosis all the way.
Okay.
But she's very smart, though. She don't seem autistic.
Does she talk?
Yeah. She can carry a full conversation.
Okay. You didn't see any vehicles before you went inside or anything like that?
No, but what worries me is these crackheads that walk in his house behind the house. I don't know. I've always felt weird about them, and I don't know. Hello?
I'm still here, ma'am. Give me just a second.
My
There.
call might be breaking up because of where we at.
Okay. What's a good callback number for you, ma'am?
Ma'am, I don't have one. My phone is not on, but I can still call 911.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Okay. I'm on the way to you. Just to confirm, where was she in the house when you saw her last?
No, she wasn't in the house, ma'am. She been playing outside today. And
Okay.
she asked me, can she play for a little bit more before it got dark, and I said yes. And I literally, her bath water is in the tub, ran, and dinner is cooking, and I came out here to get her, and I can't even find her.
Okay. Is there a certain place she likes to play outside?
Usually in the chicken coop, and that's usually where I find her every day. And I just looked in here, and she's not in here.
Okay. Is there any bodies of water nearby?
I don't know, ma'am. Me and my husband just now purchased in this house. I don't know about this area much, but it's not a good area. I'll tell you that. It's not good.
Okay. You say you searched the woods. Is that behind your house?
Yes, it's like a pathway right behind my house. And we usually take the dog sometimes in the woods to just let them run. And she'll come, so I know she knows about the woods. And but I look down the same pathway that we walk, and I do not see her.
Okay. And you said she was wearing pink Minnie Mouse pajamas. Anything else you may be wearing?
Her beads are pink.
Beats are pink.
Yeah, she's got braids. I mean, I don't know if she got on Crocs or with shoes, because she just puts on play shoes, but I don't, ma'am, it's not no way that she could have got far.
All right. Do you have any neighbors around the area that you're familiar with she might be going to?
No, we don't talk to none of these people. None of these people, because they all mostly do drugs. I don't associate.
She said she looked in the chicken coop first, because that's where she always found her daughter. She said she checked a wooded path behind the house where the family sometimes walked their dogs, and where she believed Javeayah knew the route well enough to have wandered there herself. She described her daughter's temperament to the dispatcher unprompted, telling them Javeayah was friendly, that she wasn't afraid of strangers, information that on its face sounds like a worried mother trying to help searchers understand her child, and which, in hindsight, reads very differently. She brought up the possibility of autism, careful to note no formal diagnosis existed, but insisting her daughter was smart, verbal, capable of holding a full conversation. She mentioned she was 39 weeks pregnant, due to give birth any day, and that she couldn't move as quickly or keep up with her daughter the way she normally could. She raised concerns about people she said sometimes walked behind the house, people she didn't trust, in a neighborhood she said she and her husband had only recently moved into. Every detail in that call did two things at once. It painted the picture of a devoted, frightened mother doing everything right, and it quietly planted alternate explanations, a curious child who wandered too far, unfamiliar people lurking nearby, a mother physically limited by her own pregnancy, that a search team would have to rule out one by one before ever looking close at home. It worked. Within hours, Aiken County Sheriff's deputies were on scene. Within a day, the FBI and the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED, had joined the case. Search and rescue units fanned out with 9 teams, drones, and helicopters. A local church, Bethel Baptist, became the staging ground before sunrise every morning of the search, supplying food, water, air conditioning, and a place for exhausted searchers to sit down for 10 minutes before going back into the heat. The child's father, Javeayah Harris, gave an interview to local reporters during the search. He described leaving the house that morning to run errands, stopping at what he said were 3 or 4 different stores because his daughter wanted candy, buying gas, buying drinks, waiting on laundry at a laundromat. He said he saw police activity near a Circle K and assumed it had nothing to do with him. He said that when he finally turned onto his own road and saw a police truck with a drone deployed, his first thought wasn't his daughter at all. He assumed his girlfriend had gone into labor. He was wrong about that, but only by a matter of hours, because that same night, while search teams combed the darkness for his daughter, Michelle Herring gave birth to another child. For 4 days, the visible search never stopped growing. More than 200 people involved in some capacity. Deputies, FBI behavioral analysts, a child abduction rapid deployment team, volunteer fire departments from neighboring counties. Search crews cover more than 3,000 acres by day 3, and more than 5,000 by the time the operation wound down. A local company donated digital billboard space across the county to keep her photo in front of as many drivers as possible. Neighbors were asked to check sheds, crawl spaces, and ditches, anywhere a small child could end up, whether or not anyone said the second half of that sentence out loud. And underneath all of it, running quietly and separately from the visible search, was something the public didn't know about yet. A second investigation. Here's a detail that matters more than it might seem to on the surface. At a press conference partway through the search, Sheriff Marty Sawyer mentioned, almost in passing, that alongside the visible search effort making headlines, another team was working the case from a different angle entirely, off-site, doing what he described only as their job. Sit with that for a second. A missing 4-year-old, in the earliest hours of any case like this, gets one kind of response: search and rescue, canvassing, tip lines, drones over open land. What Sawyer was describing was something else entirely, running in parallel almost from the beginning, an investigative team that wasn't looking for a lost child in the woods. It was looking at the people closest to her. Ask yourself why a department runs 2 operations like that at the same time. One has to be visible. You cannot search 5,000 acres quietly. The other doesn't need to be seen at all, and in fact works better if it isn't. That split, running from early on, tells you something about what investigators considered possible before they ever said out loud in public. It doesn't mean they'd already reached a conclusion. It means a story being told to searchers on the ground, a child who wandered off, still out there somewhere, was not the only story being worked on at the same time. By the 4th day, that quieter track had caught up to and then overtaken the first one entirely. On the morning of July 4th, Sheriff Sawyer stood at a podium at the Aiken County Government Building and delivered what he called the hardest announcement of his 36-year career in law enforcement. He told the room, and the family watching from home, that the investigation and the evidence now led them to believe Javeayah Harris was deceased. Not missing, not still out there. Gone, he said, for roughly a month before that 911 call had ever been placed. The night of the call, he said, it was already too late to save her. FBI Special Agent in charge Kevin Moore followed him at the podium and told reporters the investigation was now about pursuing justice for Javeayah. When a reporter asked how investigators had determined she'd been dead for a month, Moore said simply that he wasn't going to answer that question. Some things, even at the hardest moment of a case, stay behind the file. That same day, Sheriff Sawyer announced the arrests. Javeayah Harris, Javeayah's father, charged with homicide by child abuse. Michelle Herring, her mother, charged with the same offense, plus an additional charge of filing a false police report. Both were booked into the Aiken County Detention Center. The sheriff said more charges could still be coming. For weeks after that announcement, the public only had the outline of what had happened: a confirmed death, 2 arrests, a search that had quietly become a recovery operation. What the public did not have, not yet, was the language investigators had used to describe what actually happened inside that house. That language arrived on Monday, July 6, when the full arrest warrants were finally released. And once you read them, the outline stops being the hardest part of this story. There are 2 words in these warrants that we want you to hold on to, because everything else in this update builds from them: repeated and extreme. That is how investigators describe what happened to Javeayah inside that home. Not a single incident, not one terrible moment that spiraled out of control in a way a jury might eventually be asked to weigh against panic or poverty or desperation. The warrants describe her death as a result of repeated and extreme physical abuse carried out, in the state's own words, with extreme indifference to human life. And then the warrants give us something we did not have before this update: a timeline. The abuse, according to the documents, occurred between May 1st and June 15th. 45 days. Sit with that number for a moment, because it's a detail that changes how everything else in this case reads. This wasn't a single afternoon that ended in tragedy. Investigators are describing a sustained period more than 6 weeks, during which a 4-year-old girl was being repeatedly harmed inside her own home, while the 2 adults responsible for her spent that same 6 weeks going about the motions of ordinary life around her. That is the exact window in which the uncle's messages, the ones asking about her, the ones met with redirection and an old video instead of an answer, were being sent. That is the exact window in which neighbors were pulling her into their own homes to bathe her, feed her, and dress her in clean clothes before sending her back. People on the outside of that house were reaching toward her during those 45 days. And according to both parents' own confessions, what was happening to her on the inside during that same stretch of time is what these warrants now describe. 45 days. Both parents present in the home. Neither one picked up a phone to call for help. That is not a secret that slipped through the cracks of a busy life. That is a decision made and remade day after day for 6.5 weeks. Now look closely at how the 2 warrants differ from each other, because this is where the case gets more specific and more disturbing. Michelle Herring's warrant states that she committed child abuse or neglect, and that Javeayah's death occurred under circumstances manifesting an extreme indifference to human life, specifically by failing to seek medical attention for Javeayah after knowing that she had suffered an injury caused by physical abuse. Read that again slowly. Not an accident nobody saw coming. Not a fall down a flight of stairs. An injury that investigators say was known about, recognized, and deliberately left untreated until it killed her. And where did that information come from? Not a witness. Not a neighbor with a suspicion. The warrant states plainly that this information was obtained through the defendant's confession and the co-defendant's confession. Harris told them, 2 separate people, giving 2 separate accounts, that investigators used to build the exact same charge against both of them. Now here is where it gets more specific still. Javeayah Harris's warrant carries the same charge, homicide by child abuse, but attributes the injury itself specifically to physical abuse by the victim's mother. If you're keeping score, investigators are not alleging that both parents struck this child. They are alleging that one parent caused a fatal injury, and that both parents then made the same choice afterward, to do nothing about it. For weeks, that reframes a question almost everyone's been asking about this case since the moment it broke. Who hurt her? Because even by the state's own account, that may not be where the real weight of this case sits. The harder question, the one that should actually keep you up at night, is this one. Why did 2 grown adults, a mother and a father, watch a 4-year-old girl deteriorate for 45 days and never once pick up a phone to get her help, until the only call either of them ever made about her was one built entirely on a lie? Here is something that slipped past almost everyone when this case first broke, and it's worth going back to now, because small details are usually where a story like this starts to come apart. On the 911 call, Michelle Herring refers to Javeayah Harris as her husband. When reporters spoke to him directly during the search, Days later, he described Herring as his girlfriend. On its own, that might mean nothing. People misspeak under stress. Relationship terms get used loosely all the time, especially by people who've been together for years and have children together without ever formalizing the paperwork. But in a case built entirely on the reliability of one woman's account one night, it's worth noticing that the two people at the center of the story couldn't agree, even in the earliest hours, on what to call each other. People telling the truth don't usually get confused about who they're married to. Here's another detail worth sitting with. In the middle of that same 911 call, in between describing her missing daughter's location and clothing, Herring paused to tell the dispatcher that Javeayah had never been formally diagnosed as autistic, but that she was very smart, that she could carry a full conversation. In the middle of reporting a child missing, she was building her daughter up, painting a picture. Whether that came from grief, from performance, or from something between, the state now says the entire premise behind that call, a curious child who'd wandered off into the woods behind a house on Hillsborough Street, was fabricated from the very first word to the very last. She also told the dispatcher that she and her husband had just moved into the area, that they didn't know their neighbors well, and that she didn't trust people she said sometimes walk slowly past the property talking on their phones. That's not incidental color for a 911 call. That's the seed of an alternate suspect, planted in real time, while investigators now say she already knew there was no one else to look for. The false police report warrant against Herring confirms exactly what happened next. It states that she reported to the Aiken County Sheriff's Office that her daughter was missing and or abducted by another person, and that this was determined to be false. A search of the area and interviews with everyone involved revealed that no abduction had taken place. And then the line in that warrant that changes everything about how you have to read the rest of this case. Investigators wrote that Herring admitted she had disposed of Javeayah's body at another location. Not lost, not taken. Dispose of, that is the word chosen in the legal document. And it is the reason that days after this case became national news, search efforts didn't stop. They moved. Once the confessions gave investigators a starting point, the search shifted entirely away from the 3,000 acres of woods behind the house on Hillsborough Street and toward an area roughly 2 hours north, near the Chester and Fairfield County line, in a stretch of water known as Dutchman Creek near the Great Falls area. SLED and the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources deployed search boats to that area. Law enforcement blocked public access to the creek for an extended period. SCDNR brought in a drone team and all-terrain vehicles. SLED's helicopter flew visible search patterns that could be tracked on public flight software. Family members were independently seen near the site. The search had become focused entirely on water, and Herring had confessed to disposing of the body. Investigators haven't publicly connected those two facts in a single sentence, but they don't have to. The direction of the search says enough on its own. There's a piece of the family's history that helps explain why investigators looked north in the first place. This same family had previously lived in Union County before relocating to Aiken, on a street where neighbors, when reporters went knocking after the disappearance broke, told them they hadn't seen Javeayah in months. Not weeks, months. The search that followed appears to have traced the family's own history northward through the state, and somewhere in that water near the Chester and Fairfield County line, investigators believe Javeayah is still waiting to be found. As of this recording, that search has not produced a confirmed result. It remains active. Here is the part of this update that we think deserves more attention than it's gotten, because it's easy to read a set of warrants and move straight to outrage without stopping to think about the people who are living through this case in real time, with none of the information we have right now. None of the 200 searchers who walked those tree lines in South Carolina knew any of this. Not the FBI agents coordinating grid searches. Not the volunteer fire departments who drove in from neighboring counties. Not the parents who left their own children at home to go look for someone else's. Not the drone operators. Not the K-9 handlers. Not the church that opened its doors before sunrise every single morning of that search to hand out water and let exhausted people sit somewhere cool for 10 minutes. A candlelight vigil was held in downtown Aiken during that search. Nobody has ever taken credit for organizing it. A flyer just started circulating, and people showed up anyway, because that's what a community does when a 4-year-old goes missing. They brought Minnie Mouse balloons, because that's what her mother told the world she loved. They wore pink, because that's the color her mother said she had on the night she disappeared. Stuffed animals piled up along the fence outside the house on Hillsborough Street. One first responder who attended that vigil described the case hitting her hard enough that she had to step away and call her own adult daughter just to hear her voice. Another woman who lived nearby said that when she heard a child had gone missing that close to her own home, she felt like the whole community had an obligation to respond. Every single one of them was standing there, candle in hand, believing a story that investigators now say was already false before the first person ever lit a match. That is the part of this update that should sit heaviest with you. Not only what happened to a 4-year-old girl during the 45 days before that phone call was ever made, but what happened in the days after it, when an entire county mobilized around a story that two people, the only two people who actually knew the truth, had already built entirely out of a lie. A week to the day after that first 911 call, deputies returned to the house on Hillsborough Street. This time, they weren't searching for a missing child. Reporters on scene described watching investigators move in and out of the home, wearing latex gloves, carrying brown evidence bags. Yellow evidence markers appeared in the yard. A deputy was seen retrieving a shovel and walking into the wooded area beyond a parked truck on the property. Officers were later seen gathered around a blue tarp, and reporters described seeing what appeared to be clothing being placed into evidence bags. Sources close to the investigation clarified at the time that this was an evidence-gathering operation, not a remains recovery. In other words, investigators weren't digging for Javeayah at that specific property. They were collecting the physical evidence, clothing, soil, materials from the yard that would ultimately be used to support the confessions already on record and to build the state's case in court. Outside the crime scene tape, the memorial that had been growing quietly on that street for days kept growing. Stuffed animals, balloons, candles, cars slowing down along Hillsborough Street just to look, just to leave something behind. A quiet, tucked-away neighborhood that had spent the better part of a week being questioned by the FBI, questioned by SLED, questioned by reporters, now watching deputies walk in and out of a house they'd once considered unremarkable. Before either parent was arrested, Javeayah Harris agreed to a phone interview with a local reporter. It's worth going back to that interview now, not to relitigate it, but because hearing it again with the confessions in hand changes what you notice. He described a winding morning, getting up early, watching his daughter play outside for a while, leaving the house sometime between 6 and 7. From there, his account loops on itself in a way that's genuinely difficult to follow even on a second listen. He describes go to 3 different stores, coming back to a laundromat beside a gas station, go to another store, coming back again. He mentions buying drinks, waiting on laundry, seeing police activity near the gas station, and assuming it had nothing to do with him. He says his girlfriend, and that's the word he used, didn't have self-service that day, so she called 911 herself. By the time he turned onto his own road and saw a police truck with a drone deployed, he says he sped up, thinking something had happened close to his house. When he arrived and saw what he describes as a whole lot of police, his first assumption, he says, was that his girlfriend had gone into labor. She was due any day. It wasn't until he got out of the car that he learned his daughter was the reason for all of it. There's a detail in his account that's easy to miss on a first listen, but impossible to ignore on a second. Michelle Herring did, in fact, go into labor that same night, after Javeayah had already been reported missing, and gave birth to another child hours later, in the middle of the same police response, the same descending swarm of officers and drones that was, according to the warrants, searching for a girl her parents already knew would not be found. When asked directly whether Javeayah was known to wander off, Harris was firm. No, he said, she didn't run away. He described her as friendly to a fault, the kind of child who didn't understand stranger danger the way most parents try to teach it. He pushed back, unprompted, against early reporting that had described her as possibly nonverbal or on the autism spectrum, insisting she talked, well, better than he did, he said, and had more manners than most people he knew. That's a strange thing to correct if you already believe the search itself is unlikely to find anyone. It's also, in hindsight, exactly the kind of small detail a person clinging to a story might reach for, because getting the small things right is often how a larger story holds together, at least for a little while. When asked how he was holding up, his answer wasn't composed. He said not knowing was what was killing him. We now know that he did know. According to his own warrant, he had confessed, in his own words, to knowledge of the physical abuse that caused his daughter's death. There's a separate recorded moment that circulated after this case broke, a home video showing Michelle Herring with Javeayah, the child answering to a nickname, Boo Bear, in a small, clear voice. It's the kind of clip that exists in nearly every family's phone somewhere. Unremarkable until the context around it changes completely. Neighbors who spent time with the family described a different reality behind closed doors. One woman recalled going to check on Javeayah and finding her lie on a soiled mattress, an iPad propped in front of her face, the child unmoving, seemingly sedated in some fashion, though no formal explanation was ever offered to the people describing it. She said she brought Javeayah into her own home more than once to bathe her, feed her, and dress her in clean clothes before sending her back across the street. That single detail, repeated by more than one person close to this case, tells you that the neglect here wasn't hidden behind a locked door the entire time. It leaked. People saw enough of it to intervene in small, human ways, feeding a child, bathing a child, clothing a child, without ever having enough information or enough authority, or perhaps enough certainty, to escalate what they were seeing into something official. That is one of the hardest truths in this entire case. It is also, painfully, one of the most common truths in cases like it. Abuse this severe rarely happens in a total vacuum. It happens in the gaps between people who notice something is wrong and the systems that are supposed to act on it. It's worth walking back through that original 911 call one final time, slowly, because every sentence in it reads differently now than it did on June 30th. She told the dispatcher she'd stepped inside to cook dinner, that Javeayah's bathwater was already running, and that when she came back outside to bring her daughter in for the night, she was simply gone. She described checking the chicken coop first, because that's where she said she always found her. She described a wooded path behind the property where the family sometimes walked their dogs, and said she walked that same path herself looking for her daughter and found nothing. She spelled her daughter's name out for the dispatcher, letter by letter, even as help was already being dispatched. She described the pink Minnie Mouse pajamas, the pink beads in her hair. She mentioned being 39 weeks pregnant, unable to keep up physically the way she normally would. She raised the specter of unfamiliar people who sometimes walked behind the house, people she said she didn't trust, in a neighborhood she said she and her husband had only just moved into. Every detail was specific. Every detail was designed, whether consciously or not, to be believed. And according to the warrants now sitting in the Aiken County court system, every single one of those details was constructed around a fact she already knew and had chosen not to say out loud. Her daughter was already gone. She had been for weeks. And Harry herself had already disposed of her body somewhere else entirely by the time she ever picked up that phone. The search that call launched, 5 days, 5,000 acres, 200 searchers, was built entirely on top of a lie told by the only person who knew there was nothing left to find. It's worth understanding exactly what homicide by child abuse means as a legal charge in South Carolina, because it isn't the same thing as a standard murder charge. And the difference matters for how a jury will eventually be asked to weigh this case. Under the relevant state statute, a person is guilty of this offense if they cause the death of a child while committing abuse or neglect, and that death occurs under circumstances demonstrating extreme indifference to human life, or they knowingly aid and abet someone else's abuse or neglect that results in a child's death. Neglect under the same law includes failing to provide adequate food, shelter, or medical care where that failure results in a fatal injury or condition, and it includes abandonment resulting in death. What that means practically is that prosecutors don't necessarily have to prove a single deliberate violent act on one specific date, the way a traditional murder charge would require. They can build a case instead around a sustained pattern, abuse, neglect, or indifference over time that ultimately proves fatal. That is a meaningfully different legal question than asking who did it and on what day, and it opens the door to a different kind of evidence than a single incident homicide would. Patterns of behavior inside the household, any prior injuries, statements from anyone who spent time around the family, forensic evidence about the condition of Javeayah's remains. Whenever and if they are recovered, the offense carries a mandatory minimum of 20 years in prison and can carry a sentence of life. Both Herring and Harris are currently facing that range. Both have been denied bond. Additional charges remain possible as the investigation continues. Here is exactly where this case sits as of this recording. Michelle Monique Herring, 22 years old, is being held at the Aiken County Detention Center, charged with homicide by child abuse and with filing a false police report. She has been denied bond. Her first formal court appearance is scheduled for September 18th. Javeayah Harris, 23 years old, is also being held at the Aiken County Detention Center, charged with homicide by child abuse. He has also been denied bond. His first formal court appearance is scheduled for September 19th. Both are facing 20 years to life on the homicide charge alone. Javeayah's newborn sibling, born the night after the disappearance was first reported, has been placed in the custody of another family member. Sheriff Sawyer has asked that the extended family be given space and privacy to process everything that has come out in the weeks since. The search for Javeayah's remains active at Dutchman Creek near the Chester and Fairfield County line. As of this recording, it has not produced a confirmed result. The FBI's Columbia Field Office remains involved, alongside SLED, the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, and local investigators. There have now been 2 vigils in this case. The first happened during the search itself, when everyone gathered to believe there was still a chance Javeayah would be found alive. The second happened after the truth came out, and people came back anyway, this time with candles meant not for a search, but for a farewell. At that second vigil, one woman who had spent time near the family said she couldn't shake the image of Javeayah's face, and said, in words that stayed with everyone who heard them, that a child like that didn't deserve to die the way she did. Another attendee talked about the strange, aching gratitude of watching an entire community come together around a little girl none of them had personally known a month earlier, and how that coming together, however painful the reason behind it, was exactly what a place like Aiken needed in a moment like this. It's worth sitting with the fact that both vigils were real. The grief in the first one wasn't invalidated by what came later. Those searchers, those volunteers, that first responder who had to call her own daughter just to hear her voice, they gave something real to a story that turned out to be built on a lie. And that doesn't make what they gave meaningless. If anything, it makes it more important to say clearly, this community showed up for a child twice, once believing she might still be alive, and once knowing for certain that she wasn't, and both times they showed up because that's what decent people do when a 4-year-old's name is the only thing anyone can talk about. There are questions in this case that a courtroom will eventually have to answer, and there are questions that no courtroom ever really can. The legal questions are, in some ways, the more straightforward ones. Whether a jury ultimately accepts the state's timeline, whether confessions hold up against future scrutiny from defense attorneys who will, as is their right, challenge every detail of how and when they were obtained, whether the search at Dutchman Creek ultimately recovers Javeayah's remains, and what forensic evidence that recovery might add to a case that right now rests heavily on the words of the 2 people accused. The harder questions are the ones that don't have a legal answer at all. How does a child fall through this many gaps at once? An uncle who kept asking and kept getting redirected. Neighbors who fed her, bathed her, and clothed her, and still, for whatever reason, never escalated what they were seeing into an official report. A system that, by the time anyone outside the house understood what was happening, had already lost 45 days and can never get back. None of those people did anything wrong in the way the 2 parents in this case are alleged to have, but their stories are part of this case too. because they represent every moment where the truth almost surfaced and didn't. That's not an indictment of any one person. It's a reflection of how quietly severe abuse can hide, even in a small, close-knit neighborhood where people notice enough to intervene in small ways, but never quite enough to break the pattern entirely. This case is not over. It won't be over when the search at Dutchman Creek concludes one way or another. It won't be over on September 18th or 19th, when Herring and Harris make their first formal court appearances. It will likely still be unfolding months from now, through preliminary hearings, through whatever additional charges investigators may yet file, through a trial that a South Carolina jury will eventually have to sit through, weighing 45 days of alleged abuse against 2 confessions and a fabricated 911 call that once mobilized an entire county. We will be here for all of it when the search resumes at that creek, when the first court dates arrive, when this eventually goes to trial. Because a 4-year-old girl who liked chickens and pirates and Minnie Mouse pajamas deserves to have her name followed all the way through, not just for 5 days her disappearance made headlines, but for however long it takes for the truth about what happened to her to be fully and finally accounted for in a courtroom. Javeayah Harris was 4 years old. She weighed 40 pounds. She had pink beads in her hair and a favorite pair of pajamas, and a habit of saying yes ma'am and no sir to every adult she met. She held people's hands walking to the refrigerator. She played pirates at the park. She was being evaluated for autism, and by every account, she was smart enough to hold a full conversation with anyone who took the time to have one with her. She had an uncle who kept asking about her. She had neighbors who noticed something was wrong and did what small things they could. She had a community that searched 5,000 acres for her under a South Carolina summer sun, and then came back a second time with candles when the truth finally came out. And she had 2 parents who, according to their own confessions, chose silence over her for 45 days, until the only phone call either of them ever made on her behalf was one they had already built entirely out of a lie. She deserved better than that. She deserved better from the people who were supposed to be her entire world, and better from whatever systems existed around that family, and somehow never saw what was happening behind those walls until it was already too late to matter. Rest easy, Javeayah. The people looking for you have not stopped, and neither have we. If this update affected you, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you're new to this case or you've been following it from the very beginning. We'll be back with the next update the moment there is one. Subscribe to True Crime Killers, because we will be here when she is found. We will be here for first court date, and we will be here when this finally goes to trial.